For the next presentation, I invite Ms. Kanika Pal, South Asia Sustainability Director, Hindustan Unilever Limited and Unilever South Asia. Ms. Kanika Pal, South Asia Sustainability Director, Hindustan Unilever Limited and Unilever South Asia. This is a very important session on end-to-end solution for water conservation. Created at the exhibition hall, a request for procurement teams of all companies like HUL, Olam, Godrej, Agrovet, Marico, and all the major buyers to visit the lounge as FPOs are eagerly awaiting. I request Ms. Kanika Pal to start the presentation.
हाँ दिखेगा नहीं और ये यहाँ से आगे पीछे करूँगी तो वो भी आगे पीछे होगा हाँ ठीक है हाँ ओके परफेक्ट ओके. A very good afternoon to all of you. I know I have the onus of being one of the last sessions of the day and I am probably also holding you back from your lunch. I've been given 15 minutes. I will try to pack as much information and more importantly insights on how we view sustainability and shared value creation at HUL, in which working with agricultural communities is very, very critical for us. Just one update, the session is not on end-to-end water conservation. I will not give you any tricks up my sleeve on how to save water, but the session is on really creating a shared value. Given the size and the scale that we have as a company, how is it that we look at the entire value chain from the farm to shelf, as it mentions here, pretty much across the entire value chain. So essentially, just by raise of hands, how many of you know what Hindustan Unilever does? Or have used any one product of HUL in your lifetime? Every day, I heard somebody say every day. Does anybody use Vim? Surf Excel? See, now the hands are increasing. Maybe you don't know which brands you use and what belongs to HUL. But essentially, 9 out of 10 households in India use HUL products. It could be products from home care category. It could be personal care, Dove, Lux, Hamam, all these soaps. It could be from the foods business, our nutrition category, or it could be our quality walls ice cream. Ice cream to sabne khai hogi. How many of you have had a quality ice cream? Show of hands. See, the number of hands just keep increasing. The point that I'm trying to make is that we touch a lot of households in this country. And given that we've been around for 90 years, obviously the number of outlets in which we are present in the company are also pretty enormous. As a company, what our purpose is to make sustainable living commonplace. And essentially through a lot of these products, we humanize sustainability. We make sure not only sustainability considered when we are looking at creating the products from an R&D lens, but also how we procure some of the products for making our last mile products, to how it is when the consumer uses it and the delivery of the products and end-to-end thinking is applied. Now that can't just happen from thin air. If I were a department in the organization and I had to run sustainability, then automatically I would be possibly driving a very, very hard task. But in our organization, there are 34 indicators across the company that every business to which it applies is responsible and accountable for. Now, these indicators on sustainability performance are divided into the environmental performance, which is more on the green side, and then you have the social performance, which is more on the purple side, and in between you have health and well-being as a very important indicator of progress, which is the blue ones that you see. I want to bring your attention to the second column in the green one, which is more on protect and regenerate nature. If you can't read, I will just tell you the top agenda items there. We are talking about helping small and marginalized farmers grow. We are talking about sustainable sourcing. We are talking about water stewardship, not just in our manufacturing, but also our own foundation, which is essentially a vehicle to develop and deliver on water for public good, to actually look at 3 trillion liters of water being conserved. Essentially, that pillar is the pillar that I will operationalize through my presentation on what it means to work for agriculture with the agricultural communities at HUL. Now, from an overall sustainability lens, we have a 4-tier approach. We not just look at our operations, which is where my factories are, what my factories are doing, how is it that we are producing our products, or how the workforce is involved, but also we look at the value chain. So in the value chain creation, of course, agricultural communities become very important. But also equally important is what my brands stand for. So if I have a Lifebuoy and it stands for hygiene, then essentially I need the consumer to understand the importance of hygiene as well. So we will have a whole lot of activation on hand washing, especially in COVID, making the sanitizers available in extremely critical parts of the country, and ensuring that people are able to understand how much of sanitizer or soap to be utilized becomes very critical through the brand. And finally, the wider society. Of course, in today's day and age, now we have the CSR law, we have the ESG, the BRSR, but more importantly, as a company, if these were not there, what is it that we believe our role is in the wider society? How do we build those partnerships, and essentially how we leverage coalitions to be able to develop and dive on a core purpose, which is making sustainable living commonplace. Now let me get into our target of sustainable sourcing. 2/3 of our sourcing essentially is on agricultural produce such as cereals, starch, tomatoes, pulp and paper, board, soy, etc. Of that, we've taken a target that we will be 100% sustainably sourced. On the left-hand side, you see metrics of where we are in our sustainable sourcing journey. But by 2025, we do have the target to be deforestation-free in some of our key sustainably sourced commodities. Now, if you see, and I will probably ask you to delve deeper with me on the tomato value chain, because also we have Sayadri here, a very important partnership with Azhar and with the entire team. But more importantly, at this point of time, we have 82% of our tomatoes which are sustainably sourced. Now, what does it really mean that a tomato is sustainably sourced? I had one of my colleagues who came in the morning and she spoke about how in procurement they would look at the quality, they would look at the consistency and availability of that same product all throughout the year. But if I were to just ask you from the show of hands, how many of you really understand what sustainably sourced actually means for a company? 3 people. I don't know if you're shy to raise your hands, but just to do a dipstick, in this audience of maybe about 50, 80 odd people, 3 people have raised their hands or are confident to know what sustainable sourcing really means. Now, I'll just take a step back and look at the tomato value chain. So again, my colleague in the morning said, we are the 2nd largest producers of tomato in this country, but only 3% is actually processed, which means that we are dealing with a deep problem of fragmentation of farmers at source. If we are able to aggregate the farmers and there is collective buying as well as collective might put in their capability building, then the possibility of them finding a buyer with the quality of produce being more enhanced, becomes even more tangible. And therefore, working with farmer-based organizations, or ensuring that there is greater resilience through a farm-to-fork model becomes imperative in the sustainable sourcing strategy of a company like ours. So what is it that we have done while looking at sustainable sourcing? We need ketchup, and therefore we can very well be just a standalone ketchup manufacturer through Kisan. But essentially, we need good quality paste available all throughout the year to go into our ketchup making. That's one part of the value chain. But the larger part of the value chain is where our partnership with Sahyadri comes into play. We need to work with farmer-producer organizations and the tomato growers, who may be very, very marginalized and fragmented, essentially to ensure that there is constant capability building, there is constant upping the ante on some of the demands that we have from our stakeholders, which is going beyond sustainable sourcing, but also in the realms of regenerative agriculture and net zero. Now, regenerative agriculture essentially means that we are constantly marrying soil protection, biodiversity, water availability, and income generation for the farmer all together constantly. And while doing that nexus, we make choices that help us to decarbonize our business in the value chain. The linkage between regenerative agriculture for any food business and going net zero is very, very critical. Now, as a company, we may understand that, but how do you make farmers in your value chain actually be able to deliver on that? For that, you will need to work with farmer-producer organizations like Sahyadri, or build many more of Sahyadris for that matter. So I will not dive into this chart, but actually play a video which gives you an end-to-end summary of what our Sahyadri model has been, how the partnership has really evolved, and how is it that we intend to scale it up next from Maharashtra to Bihar. I'll play the video now.
Agriculture is the backbone of the Indian economy, contributing to almost 19% of the country's GDP, and is the primary source of livelihood for about 58% of India's population. India is also the world's second largest tomato producer, but it faces many agricultural challenges. Less than 3% is processed, resulting in high post-harvest. Almost 19% of the country's GDP, and is the primary source of livelihood. India is also the world's second largest tomato producer, but it faces many agricultural challenges. Less than 3% is processed, resulting in high post-harvest losses. Driven by the purpose of making sustainable living commonplace, and being one of the largest food companies in India, each year can make a real difference to address this concern. And we found the perfect partner in Sahyadri Farms, India's largest farmer-producer organization, owned completely by farmers. Our search for a tomato-based supplier has today, and also by introducing a high-yielding variety of seeds, which has resulted in a 40% increase in farm output and 50% higher returns to farmers. Sahyadri's fully equipped farmer facility center, advisory and regenerative agri principles, in-house soil testing facility.
To re-emphasize, from the onion, what we've covered is our operations, we've covered our value chain, and also through the value chain, what our brands really stand for. If you ever pick up a Kisan ketchup bottle, please turn around and see a QR code. When you scan that QR code, and I would request you to do that, you will actually hear the story of the Kisan from where the tomatoes are being sourced. That's the power of the brand that we want to leverage to really be able to make a difference in the lives of the consumer, making informed choices, and therefore making sustainable living commonplace. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is the wider society. And there are two parts to this that I will not necessarily follow the charts, but just tell you the story. So we have the Hindustan Unilever Foundation, whose purpose is essentially to create water potential throughout the country as water for common good. And essentially, if you see, more than half of, or rather almost 80% of water requirements in this country are used for agriculture. But the rate at which we're using water, especially groundwater, if we continue that, then by 2030, we will be 50% out of the water resources. Now, half of our water use efficiency is actually less than what's there in the developing countries. And also, half of the Indian farmland grows water-intensive crops, and more than half of the farming community depends on agriculture. The relevance of water in agriculture cannot be denied. But what essentially needs to be done is how do you work with farming communities in a manner that helps them to bring down the demand of water and at the same time increase the supply or sufficiency of water, and that's what HUF really does. It's working with more than 14,000 villages. It's working with 3 lakh and more than that farmers, essentially to be able to create a water potential through strategies like to increase the demand, it could be watershed management. To increase the supply, it could be watershed management, spillway, bunding, soil moisture conservation, etc. But to reduce the demand, essentially looking at alternative patterns of cropping, also looking at less water intensive crops becomes very, very critical. And essentially in the last couple of years, almost a decade, what we've done is created a potential of 2.6 trillion liters of water already. By 2025, our target is to reach 3 trillion liters, but essentially if we achieve it beforehand, then we will revise our target and become even more robust in our methodologies to be able to broad-base the solutions that we've created with the communities. Similarly, across our factory ecosystem, we have another community program called Prabhat. Now, Prabhat develops communities holistically. What this means is that we won't just look at water, but in any village, the problem statements on income generation, health and nutrition, water, waste. Essentially, these are going to be our 3 or 4 areas of intervention, how we will create sustainable communities. And while doing so, we will engage with agri-communities on not just water interventions, but also interventions that help them to strengthen income with agri-extension services or alternative means of income generation in their family, such that at the end of the day, there is a surplus income household. I'll give you an example. In Madhya Pradesh, Mahua is prevalent in a district of Chhindwara. Now, over there, Mahua typically falls on the ground, and then the collectors would collect it. While collecting it is where the damage really happens. By a simple solution of having shade net across the mahua, around the mahua tree, the farmers are actually able to collect more mahua. The quality of mahua collection gets preserved, and then by teaching them value-added techniques such as making cookies out of mahua, which has tremendous nutritional benefit, and also helping them with market linkages wherever there could be a demand, could be in tourism or could be in hotels. It leads to added value from mahua that a simple collection and storage of mahua would do. Some of our farmers are actually getting an increased price and increased yield simply because they are able to collect it better, and therefore the average monthly income of the farmers in such situations also increases, but they are able to do a lot more. Similar work we are doing in the dairy value chain, where we are helping dairy farmers to help increase better their quality of milk. At the same time, value added products such as ghee or paneer or khoya, which can be actually traded locally in hyper-local markets, or for that matter within the local communities and villages. We have stories from Sumerpur in Hamirpur district in UP, where a grandmother, because of what she's been able to do because of value-added products of milk, is actually now able to support the education of her son. Now, these are not her grandson. Now, these are not stories of simple something that we've done in some village. These are really human stories of change that happen because you work with agricultural communities. On one hand, from the water output that helps them in the core of farming, leading to less demand of water but better output. And on the other hand, you lead to further value addition in their own families that leads to a holistic win-win situation for them. Essentially, again, from Prabhat's perspective, we have saved more than 130 billion liters of water and the other parameters that you can see. I think what I'm really trying to get at is that when an organization like Hindustan Unilever really looks at working with communities, very importantly, the agri-communities of this country, it is not just about the water output. It's not just about the yield for a particular region. It's really looking at holistically what is the might of an organization like HUL collectively, what are the products and where do we need to source the agricultural commodities from, and what impact that we can have as a value add in those communities as demonstrated through the tomato example to really make it a win-win-win situation. If I just cumulatively look at just the tomato sourcing and the work that HUF and Prabhat does, we are working almost across 4 lakh farmers. Look at our entire sourcing and our entire value chain, it would be running into a lot more numbers and maybe zeros. The idea that one has to look at is the value creation that happens at the end of the day a shared value creation, and is that truly making sustainable living commonplace? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the informative insight and speech. I request you to be here for some time. We are heading towards the conclusion of day 1. I request Director General, Bombay Chamber, Shri Sandeep Khosla, to kindly come upon the dais and felicitate Ms. Kanika Pal. Director General, Bombay Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Shri Sandeep Khosla. Thank you very much. And now, as we are heading towards conclusion, I invite Mr. Mrigank Paranspe to propose a vote of thanks. Before that, just 2 announcements. After vote of thanks, all delegates are requested to proceed for the lunch area just in front of the stage. This area, and all the speakers and moderators are requested to come backstage. Thank you very much. See you all tomorrow morning at 9:50. Before that, vote of thanks by Mr. Mrigank Paranspe.
Thank you. I'm indeed privileged to perform the pleasant task of proposing the vote of thanks at the 14th AGRICORP conference. On behalf of the Bombay Chamber and on my own behalf, I extend sincere thanks to our dignitaries of the opening session of today, Shri Dashrath Tambre, our keynote speaker, Dr. Usha Barwale Zahar, Chairman and Executive Director, Grow Indigo Private Limited. I also extend this opportunity to extend my sincere thanks to Mr. Ritesh Tiwari, President, Bombay Chamber. The AGRICORP 2023 conference is in association with Kisan Forum Private Limited, and I would like to thank the entire Kisan team for extending their support in making this conference a success. This conference would not have accomplished its success without the strong support of our sponsors, namely State Bank of India, Rallies India Limited, Celsius Logistics Private Limited, Godrej Agrovet Limited, BASF, Nichem Solutions, NABARD, and our media partner, ABP Maza. I extend my sincere thanks to our panel members and moderators, Shri Azhar Tambuwala, Ms. Ansu Archana, Dr. Dinesh Chauhan, Mr. N.K. Rajavelu, Mr. Sahil Jain, Mr. Sanket Mehta, Mr. Rohan Ursar, Mr. Sanjeev Masalia, Mr. Ankush Jain, Mr. Parag Gadre, Mr. Ganesh Kasekar, Azhar again, and Vijay Ganeshan Iyer. My fellow co-moderators, Mr. Yogesh Mohite and Jayashree Nilkhan. Ms. Kanika Paul for the session on shared value creation. I will of course fail in my duty if I do not thank all those directly and indirectly involved in making this event happen. And last but not the least, I thank this august audience for making it to this important event. Looking forward to seeing all of you join us tomorrow for yet another engaging session. Thank you.
Request for all delegates to proceed for the lunch this way, just in front of the space, area in front of the stage, and all the speakers and moderators, a kind request to be present at backstage. For tomorrow's session, Registration will start at 9 a.m. and the session will begin at 10 o'clock. Before that, there will be recap of day 1 at 9:50. See you all tomorrow morning. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.